I'll shine a light.
Play on music and everything, how exciting. I'm here today to give you some strategies for building and maintaining culture as you grow. And I'm going to get pretty specific, pretty tactical stuff, but I'm also going to tell you stories, mostly other people's stories, because I think they're pretty helpful when you think about growing a business and working with people and excelling, more or less. So let's dive in. I am a CEO of one of Chicago's fastest growing tech companies and one of, dare I say, the nicest companies in town. And it's a pretty good gig. And I get asked a lot, how did you end up at Jellyvision? How did your career take you to this position? And I have to say, none of it makes sense on paper. I'm the kid of academics. I graduated with a liberal arts degree. I had no skills, no network, and no experience whatsoever when I first faced the job market. So I did what a lot of people in that situation do. I went into advertising. Sorry, it's true. I got a job right out of college at a company called Leo Burnett. And I had an incredible run there where the most important thing I learned is that anything can be important and interesting if you work with the right people and you have passion, high standards, and curiosity. And so what I did right out of school is I basically had $100 million a year to spend to get kids to eat Pop-Tarts and Eggo waffles and Nutri-Grain bars. So I did sort of traditional CPG advertising, big book of business. And then I spent the second 3 years at Leo Burnett doing the opposite of advertising. I was in a new brand and new business development think tank for the Kellogg Company, cereal company. And I helped them look at acquisitions and figure out what new products to launch and what new markets to go after. Spent a good deal of time watching a large company innovate, or try to innovate. And after 6 years, I wanted to go from big to small, from slow to fast, from CPG to tech, new media, and I wanted to go from being a creative person, an instigator, to being the least creative person in the room. And boy, oh boy, did Jellyvision deliver in spades. I joined the company at the height of the You Don't Know Jack gaming days. Has anyone heard of You Don't Know Jack? A couple hands. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? The company I joined was riding high on being really successful at developing mass market trivia games with sass and attitude. It was a time where we had rejected Seth Meyers, the talk show host, for a writing job. He wasn't good enough to get a writing job. Don't worry, he's done fine with his career. But unbelievable talent in Chicago was making a bunch of interactive properties, and I joined to help them manage these brands across emerging media, to work with partnerships, and to market as we go from CD-ROM to TV show. You Don't Know Jack had 10 CD-ROM titles, 2 PlayStation versions, 2 online versions, and a short-lived television show on ABC Primetime starring Paul Rubens, AKA Pee Wee Herman. Can't make this stuff up. So what an incredible job I had, what incredible company I joined. And I joined as marketer. I was VP track at Leo Burnett. Jellyvision at the time was a little bit uncomfortable giving me a full-blown director title, so I said, let's not worry about titles. I don't want to take a step down and be a marketing manager, just call me marketer. Join this company I love, coolest gig in town. 6 months later, become president, and I inherit a P&L of a company going off a cliff. Jellyvision basically monetized things by getting publishers to pay us to develop games. We'd develop the games, and then we'd share in a royalty on the back end. And we had a very high burn and very few big new ideas in the hopper. Said, no worries, we're gonna make it work. We have the talent, we have the effort, we're gonna pull this together and make it work. And then a trifecta of hurt came our way. The first thing that happened is more or less the CD-ROM market, our bread and butter in the 90s, died. We played a great role in helping it die, and that we made the millionaire CD-ROMs, fastest selling CD-ROMs of all time, that ended up in your Cheerios box as a free giveaway. So the price point of CD-ROMs went from $30 to $20 to $10 to $5 in 18 months. Could no longer support our type of development with big brands and lots of content. And then the console market, the boxes that kids love to play, we also build for that, and that was going through a next generation console transition, meaning the first Xbox, the first PlayStation, the first Dreamcast. Awesome, but all the investment from publishers goes into core games that really show off the technology, not mass market games like we made. He said, okay, games are going online, we'll figure it out. Nobody's making money yet, but we'll get a bridge and we'll figure out how to create content online that you can make money on. And then the dot-com bubble burst, and there was no way to bridge. We had 3 publishing opportunities at the time to try to make it work. The first one died, the second one died, and I remember exactly where I was sitting the moment the phone went down on the 3rd deal dying, and I said, we're gonna have to shut down the company. We did a lot of things well, and that we were really transparent and really proactive about it. But it is such a lesson to utterly faceplant as an executive before you're 30 years old. It sticks with you in a lot of ways. It's a very formative experience. But we laid off a company of almost 80 people, got it down to a core team of 12. I laid myself off, which is not an exercise I'd wish on any of you. Dear Amanda from Amanda. Actually, that's embellishing. My lawyer and I actually wrote letters to each other, but in truth, I laid myself off. And so I ended up going to Europe. 9/11 happens. I think to myself, I'm never going to work again. I go to San Francisco to hang out with my sister, where everyone is unemployed. And I kind of get like a little bit of perspective, like no one's working. I'm not alone in this. Like kind of everybody's not working in San Francisco in 2001. And then the founder of Jellyvision, Harry Gottlieb, calls me, and he pulls off a miracle. He raises a seed round in 2001 and says, we're gonna start over. We're gonna do a new thing. Come back and rejoin the company. So new funding, new mission, not virtual game show hosts, but virtual advisors. Kind of going not B2C consumer gaming, but B2B, going where there's furrowed brow, where people are trying to do complicated and boring but important things online, and they need someone to talk you through it. We're gonna build this enterprise-level software that helps people do important stuff online. You know, we had learned a couple lessons that were important in restarting. We learned the value of owning what you make. Never sell outright what you can rent, right? So we owned our own IP in the gaming days, and we've always known that like owning your own IP is important in the software business. We also learned that great editorial perspective, voice, tone, wit, edge, can turn a commodity, like a trivia game, into a mega franchise, like You Don't Know Jack. We also learned a couple things from our failure. Stay scrappy, stay lean, stay humble. You will never see an Aeron chair at Jellyvision, no matter how much we grow, no matter how big we get. We're gonna keep it lean, and we're gonna keep it grateful. And that's our second lesson, is we learned about gratitude. When the worst thing happens, which you utterly fail, you have a chance to live again. And it allowed us to take the business really seriously, but never, ever ourselves. We do not take ourselves very seriously. So we had all this perspective, we had this new funding, we had a new business development direction. Come back, let's do it, and then we proceed to spend the better part of a decade going sideways. Never quite getting traction, but managing to not run out of money. And that is an incredible way to incubate a culture. 14 to 20 people working in close proximity, thinking you're on the verge of greatness at any moment for 7.5 years. You really start to develop a vibe of who you are and what your tribe is and how you make decisions. You really get cohesive. And that has been an incredible building block, because sometime around 2009, 2010, we landed on something called Alex. Alex is not the first time we tried to productize and scale what we do. It's simply the first time we were successful. And Alex, last year, was sold to more than 600 large companies, representing 10 million employees, and $84 billion worth of premium decisions were made on our platform. What is Alex? It runs to the core of the complicated and boring but important. It helps people make better decisions in choosing and using their benefits. Nothing is more boring, more confusing. People would rather pay taxes than choose benefits until Alex. And we help you make these really great decisions, and most importantly, we don't sell anything other than math and advice. We help people figure out what is cheapest for them and their family based on their needs, and then we explain to them how the plan works. And in doing that, we've really become a market leader, growing 130 people this year. And it's been great. It's an unbelievable run we're having right now. But it's not necessarily easy. I can't complain about it because, you know, growing pains are hard, but I felt the pains of shrinking and the pains of standing still, and they're worse. But I want to tell a little story, my first of many of other people's stories, that try to sum up the lesson learned by Jellyvision. Has anyone here heard of Bonnie St. John? One person. That's the first time ever. I apologize in advance because I embellish and I get details wrong, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Bonnie St. John, I heard her give a talk 3 years ago. She saunters out on stage, and she's a very attractive woman. Her company is called Courageous Spirit, Inc., which is a very big name for a self-named company, right? Kind of like, all right, Bonnie, but she owns it. 50-odd-year-old African-American woman wearing a bright red jacket, a very brightly colored floral skirt, and a patent leather yellow shoe on one foot, and then a patent leather yellow shoe on a Terminator-like prosthetic. And she sort of glides out on stage and absolutely commands your attention from beginning to end. Bonnie is someone who was not born with all the advantages in life. One of her great disadvantages was she was born severely disabled and had her leg amputated a few inches above the knee as a very young child. And nothing ever holds her back. One of the amazing things she did in her life was she learned how to ski on one leg at the age of 14. And by the time she was 19, she was good enough to qualify for the Paralympics in downhill skiing. And she tells a story of like, should she go to the Olympics? Should she go or not? She couldn't figure it out. Her church helped her raise money, and this woman goes to the Paralympics in Germany. She describes, she's a really good storyteller, so you feel it. She describes being at top of the mountain, on one ski, getting counted down, 3, 2, 1, go. She pushes off, and she's running her Olympic run. Every turn is so tight. She feels it. You can almost hear when you're skiing well as much as you feel it. She looks up, she sees the finish line, she finishes her run, and she says, that's the best I can do. She looks up. Not only is she in first place, she has set a Paralympic record. And she says, no, it's the best of 2 runs that determine the winner. You have to do 2 runs, and it's your combined score that determines who wins. And she says, I've got it. I feel it today. And she goes up to the warming hut, and she waits her second run. She'll be the last one to go. That's how it works in the Olympics. Morning becomes noon, noon becomes afternoon, and the sun, which had been on the slope, goes behind the trees, and the snow that had softened during the day begins to harden. And apparently, when you're skiing at 70 miles per hour on one ski and you hit ice, sometimes you fall. So she's sitting in the warming hut hearing another skier down, another skier down. And she says, not me, not today. She gets up, last skier to go, 1 ski, they count her down, 3, 2, 1. She goes, and again at the top, swoosh, 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 flying. And she feels it. She looks up, she sees the last turn, and then the finish line, and she says, I know there's been ice, but I'm going to take it tight. I'm going to get the gold. She takes it tight, she catches her ski, and she falls. And she has this palpable moment where she says, I can't believe I fell, and then she pops up, pushes herself across the line, she finishes. And she had fallen from the first to the second to the third. Bronze medal. First woman to ever medal, African-American woman to ever medal in the Paralympics. Amazing. But Bonnie's the kind of person who goes, you know, the thing I take away from it is the moment I said I can't believe I fell cost me the gold. Her lesson is everyone falls down. Winners get up. Gold medal winners get up the fastest. We did not have the ability at Jellyvision to pop back up. The humility to learn the lessons that the fall trying to teach you, and sort of good-natured sense of humor without reason that it's gonna get better, we're gonna eventually win, we wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't be talking to you about how we run culture at Jellyvision. But here I am, and here we are. Let's dive in. So if you happen to Google Jellyvision, ever at any point, you're going to see a lot of awards lately, right? We won some awards, we've gotten some nice recognition, but that is not what the story of Jellyvision is all about. The one thing Jellyvision's done, like some tech companies have an algorithm, some people have Six Sigma processes, everyone wins for different reasons. We win for one clear reason, and that's our people. We have hired the most amazing, humble, hardworking, talented, but don't act, with any arrogance at all people. And the way we organize them is around a mantra. And the reason why we have a mantra is I tried for 2 years to write a mission statement that galvanized me, that said this is why we get up in the morning, what we do is important. And I could never quite crack the poetry of it in a way that was meaningful to anyone. So our chief creative officer said, stop doing the mission. Stop trying to write a mission statement. Instead, write a mantra. What do you say every day? What guides every decision? I'm like, oh, that's easy. Our mantra is simply be helpful. Be helpful, be helpful, be helpful. Be helpful to our customers, be helpful to our users, be helpful to each other, the company and the community at large. And we break it down because being helpful is actually a lot harder than you think. It's not about being nice and listening, right? You have to empathize, you have to understand, you have to problem solve, you have to connect dots. And you have to have a bias towards action. So I said to myself, that's about it. If we just really, really do this, we bring expertise and wisdom, perspective, and bias towards action, and have good tactical strategies underneath it, everything will take care of itself, right? That's all you got to do. I thought that until I heard this guy talk. His name is Bert Jacobs. He's the CEO of a company called Life is Good. And he sauntered out onto a stage wearing a backwards baseball cap, a t-shirt that said, "Not all who wander are lost," in shorts. And I remember thinking, Joker. I have plenty of jokers at work. I don't need a joker at a conference. And it turns out he's one of the most compelling speakers ever. His company is that Life is Good t-shirt company where Jake surfs, Jay walks a dog. They have a big t-shirt at Midway. If you happen to fly in and out of Midway, that's his company. And it started because he and his brother were at the Jersey Shore. They got tired of being hungry all the time. They made a sign that said, "Buy a t-shirt and feed 2 hungry guys." They made $500, this is the best thing ever. And that is literally how the company started. He's a big-time Boston guy. Boston is clearly important to him, his company, everything he thinks about. He's one of 6 Boston sons to a single Boston mother. And he tells all these incredible anecdotes for an hour and a half, and he ends with a story about the Boston Marathon bombing. 1,000 people were in the room. It goes dead silent because you can tell what it means to him. Talks about how he learned about the bombing. He said, "I learned about it the same way everybody else did, CNN. But I was at a Red Sox game, and my first thought was, dear God, my city. And my second thought was, dear God, my company." Because they're a marketing t-shirt company, they were doing marketing. He had 51 employees at the finish line handing out t-shirts. And he's like, oh my God. So he calls a meeting at Ground Zero. Everyone must check in 6 blocks away at a bookstore. 50 out of 51 people show up. One is missing in action, unaccounted for. He says, okay, everyone go home, stay home until further notice. I'm on it. Because the city of Boston is shut down, Bert begins to run. He runs to the hospital and tries to talk his way in, but it's Homeland Security. They won't even confirm that his team member is there. He goes home, works the phones, runs back to the hospital, and talks his way in. And sure enough, his team member is there, and he gets to see him. And he flashes a picture of the guy on the Jumbotron. It's a guy in a hospital bed wearing a hospital gown with one of those tracheotomy neck things on. He's not intubated, but he has a tracheotomy neck thing on. And he is covered in shrapnel wounds. Bert walks in and says, oh, dear God. And the guy says, no. I feel so lucky. What can I do? It's like, I don't know. You're the victim of a bombing in Boston. What are you talking about? The guy says, no. First bomb goes off. I don't know what's happening. Second bomb goes off. I hit the ground. When I open my eyes, I look to my left, I see a dead child. When I look to the right, I see 4 people missing limbs. I go arm, leg. What can I do? Guy's like, I don't know. Bert, I'm on it. Calls an all-hands meeting. More than 300 employees show up, and they start to brainstorm, what can we do? They're a t-shirt company, they say, and right away Boston Strong had gone viral. Let's make Boston Strong t-shirts. Bert says, no, let's not do that, because more or less that's a message of, hey, you picked on the wrong city. And we're a company about optimism and hope. So they came up with a t-shirt that on the front said Boston, and on the back said, nothing is stronger than love. They printed them up and put them in storefronts all over Boston, and within a week, it was the best-selling t-shirt in the history of the company. And every penny of proceeds, not profits, but proceeds, went to buy prosthetics for the victims of the bombing. They literally put the people of Boston back together. And I heard that story, and you have probably many thoughts, but I thought, what did it feel like to be an employee of that company on that day? How has the notion of what it means to be a community, the employer-employee relationship, how has that changed? And what can that community do when properly directed? And so Bert changed the way I look at the business. And I've said it's sort of a right brain, left brain thing. When you're thinking about the company, thinking about leading a company, and thinking about culture. There's the brain, you gotta have a good business. But there's the heart, you've gotta have a good company. And they're not always the same thing. For a long time, we had a good company, character, integrity, fun, caring, empathy, but didn't always have a scalable business. And so we've defined them separately, good company, good business. And this is how we define it. A great business for us is high growth and cash flow positive. A lot of tech companies like to burn a lot of investor money. Our lesson from our failure is be really, really conservative with cash, so we actually fund our own business. Net new customer acquisition, nothing surprising there, but that's how we define good business. And this is how we define good company. Consistent high standards and deep respect for each individual that allows very talented, kind people to be the best versions of themselves. Importantly, not best worker, best version. You bring your whole self to work at Jellyvision. As long as you're respectful to other people, you bring your whole self. And we create a community that is very accepting and very tolerant and very trusting and very flexible. So we hire and tolerate only fully formed people. You must be able to say, I don't know. You must be humble, because there's so many incredibly talented people that if someone comes in and tries to take up more than their fair share of oxygen, it's just unkind. We lead with trust and benefit of the doubt. We assume people will use good judgment. Not once they've proven something, but upon being hired, we assume that they are worthy of trust, and we act accordingly, and we ask for trust in return, and we do not resort to policy to govern behavior. We say, be in the moment, look at the situation, and use good judgment. Self-motivated learning and career pathing. If you're someone who needs a new job description every 6 months, we're not so great. If you're someone who sees a problem, gets bothered by it, and wants to solve it, we'll clear the path for you to run it down. We're awesome for people who are self-motivated about their career and learning. Community amplification is a really horrible way to basically say, I get approached a lot because I'm a CEO of a tech company and female. Thank you for noticing. It's a little bit unusual. And so people say you should have a platform like Miss America. Our platform is our people's platform. They bring their charities, their interests, their community, their extracurriculars to work, and we put our people and our dollars behind them because we hire incredible people. Let's amplify them. And then lastly, we really focus on open and honest feedback. I used to sort of do everything when we were 14. I was 14 people. I was a project manager, I was the HR person, I was business development, I was sales. Now we have incredibly important decisions being made by people in rooms that I have yet to meet. I don't even know their names, and they're making incredibly important decisions around our customer and our business. So they need to give us feedback and tell us what they're hearing so that we can change just as much as we try to guide our people around the corporate values and what we care about and what we think is important. So really, really driving open and honest communication is critical to what we do. So let's move into 4 strategies that help create and maintain a great culture while you grow. And first, we're going to define what culture is, right? What is culture? We do the obligatory definition. A lot of people tend to think culture are the statements you write on the wall. But in fact, culture is between us at work and between you at work. How do you make decisions? Who's in a meeting? What do you laugh at? What do you not tolerate? How do you hire? When do you hire? How do you spend? It really is between us. So I basically say process can best be exemplified in the people you have, how you get stuff done, and what's important enough to write down into a policy. So here are 4 tips for you as you grow. The first, you've heard this before, hire slowly, right? When you are in a massive growth situation like we are, we had to revise it. So it's not hire slowly, it's hire thoughtfully and deliberately. And let's start with job descriptions. They are simply the single most important marketing companies do at an early stage, and it never changes. Think about it, it's more or less a commercial, an ad, for talented people to give you the vast majority of their waking hours. Why be boring? Why be boring? When you're boring, no offense to the Better Business Bureau, this is a perfectly fine standard job description, right? It tells all the basic things you need to know. It gives you quite clear description. Here are the things you're going to be doing. It's great. But it leads back with this. This is what you get back. A candidate wrote, my skills include strong interpersonal communication, the ability to develop and present presentations, attention to detail, and ability to multitask, ability to self-review to ensure accuracy and quality of work, and have had the opportunity. Can't even back it up in the sentence in which he's writing it because he's just firing off basic responses to basic job descriptions. So you have to understand you get what you give. The more creative you are, the more caring you are, the more inspiring you are in your job descriptions, these commercials, the more caring and thoughtful, inspired your applicants will be, and then the cream rises to the top and you spend a lot less time interviewing and a lot less time combing through resumes because those who bite lean in and differentiate themselves royally. But it starts with the hard work of actually knowing you. What makes your job interesting? What makes your team interesting? How do you work? How do you operate? What do you celebrate? What do you not tolerate? And how can you tell that story in a job description to try to galvanize people into joining your team? Hard but incredibly important work of marketing. And here's just a quick example. Medium did this job description. This is for a job that people wouldn't consider necessarily sexy. It's super critical to a software company. Medium is seeking an inquisitive, tenacious, and thorough engineer who loves to break things in order to keep us honest about we're shipping. You have the team's trust and power to say, you can't ship that. You better believe the best in the business responded to this commercial in full force. Second thing, our process, sorry to go through a little bit of process. We require a mandatory custom letter. It's hard to fake good writing. Everyone at Jellyvision has to write well. Then we do an initial screen with a recruiter, and then we do an audition. And the auditions are very difficult in this economy, but it self-selects out a lot of people who don't have the humility they need to fit in at Jellyvision. We don't ask you to talk about your talent, we ask you to show it. And we try to give you work that is very, very close to the work you'll be doing in the job, so that typically people get really into it, invest a lot more time than we would expect, and they start to sort of say, this is the job I want now that I understand what the work is. Then we do full round interviews, we do reference checks, background checks, we do a lot of work with large financial institutions now, and then finally we get to an offer. It's an incredibly rigorous process, and it allows people to get to know us as much as we're getting to know them. And sometimes people actually say that they enjoy it. But nobody bats 1,000. People change, companies change, and that is why the second thing you have to do is part ways quickly with transparency, generosity, and compassion. And the number one reason managers don't move on underperforming people isn't they don't want to deal with change at work. It's they have great compassion and concern for the individual, and they do not want them to financially suffer. So we work very hard on making sure we hit all of these quickly, transparently, generously, and with compassion. One of the biggest things we do is we set expectations, not just in job descriptions that are 4 or 5 pages long, but in constant written feedback. I know written feedback is going out of vogue and everyone says ditch the feedback. For us, written feedback is really, really interesting because typically you can spot an underperformer within 30 days. And this is our chance to force early conversations so that we can realign. We do weekly check-ins, lots of communication, but we also have something called the graceful leaving policy that you get on your first day, and it says basically, welcome to Jellyvision. Let's talk about you leaving. It says if we're in ever financial duress, you will know about it. We will not hide anything from you so that you can make good decisions. If you are underperforming, we will let you know, and we will give you a chance to turn things back around. No surprises. And similarly, you are talented. You have many options. Life is long and interesting. When you choose to leave Jellyvision, we ask that you let us know when you're beginning your looking for another job rather than giving us 2 weeks' notice, because we don't have any redundancy and you guys are really hard to replace. And what happens is you have top engineers. I had a top engineer come say, I've been at Jellyvision my entire career. I want to do something different. I literally was like, oh, sweet dear, what am I going to do? When are you thinking? He said, how about 11 months from now? Because he knew we would not lame duck him. He knew we would continue to give him raises and challenges until his last day. And when you have that trust and that open dialogue, you can do amazing things like get people to give you almost a year of notice instead of 2 weeks of notice, which is darn near impossible for a company to navigate for a top employer. So we set expectations. One of the greatest challenges we've had in the culture of NICE is everyone gets feedback. It's really hard to hear if it's just like, hey, this is stuff you should work on, or hey, your job's at risk. So we work very hard on coming up with a construct of writing down, we are worried about you, I am worried about you, I'm concerned enough that I'm putting this in a letter to try to force transparency so that nice people can't get through a probationary meeting without telling the person they're talking to, your job's at risk if things don't turn around. So really focusing on transparency and getting through. And then we soften the landing. We will have people who have been more or less fired for performance do working transitions to try to help them land on their feet. We pay everyone severance. I don't think we've ever had a situation where we didn't provide severance. We do outplacement counseling, and we allow people to control the narrative, which means on their last day or 2 weeks before their last day, whenever it is, it's theirs to communicate if they want to. And yeah, it makes it a little awkward sometimes, but we try to leave people with as much dignity intact, and then they end up saying really nice things about us because underperformers know it and aren't happy either. So third thing, Stick by your values, even when it gets harder, and it does get harder. People joining Jellyvision don't know that I was one of 14 people who used to sit in a room with my feet on the desk going, how do we make it happen? You become CEO, I share a room with a CFO, we have a door, I'm loud. How do we get people to still have openness and transparency and to give us feedback back? It used to be obvious. We're in a room, people would shout, everyone would hear anything. And as we grow, we really have to focus on how do we promote communication. And I used to put my hand on my chest and say, you have to communicate, you have to communicate, you have to communicate. And then our founder came up with a really beautiful way to talk about feedback. Harry had this thing. You guys ever been to lunch and you've noticed that somebody gets a little like food on their teeth and you're trying not to look, trying not to look, and finally you're like, hey, you got a little something. What do they say? Every single time they say thank you. Thank you. Because feedback is kind. Feedback is nice and helpful. Nobody wants schmutz on their face. And so we've called this thing, it's the Schmutz Pact. Just like you wouldn't want me to sit there with like spinach in my teeth, you don't want me to have missed the feedback in a meeting. You don't want me to show up late. You don't want me to shoot down ideas before someone's had a chance to present them. The Schmutz Pact is the way we honor. It's hard to speak up. You might take it the wrong way. I mean this really well. People will now say Schmutz Pact and then give you critical feedback. And it's your lesson at Jellyvision to put your shoulders down, put your hands down, open yourself up, listen, and then say thank you, because clearly the person is caring about you. We didn't have a Schmutz Pact when it was 14 people in a room. We have Schmutz Pact when 20 people started 2 Mondays in a row, and we had 40 new people who didn't understand the culture, and so we talk about it as Schmutz Pact. So figuring out how to scale your values and stand by them, even when there's more risk, and even when there's more newness, and even when you're not sure it's always going to go to plan, is incredibly important. And then the last thing I'm going to do is tell you one more person's story. This is Michael Abrashoff. He wrote a book called It's Your Ship. Has anyone read this book? Awesome. I'm going to get it wrong again. He is the youngest guy ever to be offered the position of captain in the Navy. It happened in his 30s, and usually it happens in your 50s. It's a very, very high exclusive club, high honor. And he was offered to be captain of, simply put, the worst ship ever in the Navy. There are 2 ways that the quality and standards of a ship are measured. One is by standardized tests. There's an awful lot of standardized testing in the Navy, and they look at pass rates of the servicemen and women. And the second is they look at re-enlistment rates. How many people on the boat wanted to re-enlist? They had the lowest pass rate. Vast majority of people failed the tests, and 0% of the people wanted to re-enlist. Never before in the Navy had 0% of people wanted to be on a boat. It was metaphorically a sinking ship. This guy goes, you know what? I'm in. I'll take the job. And he walks in and as captain of a very hierarchical, heavily matrix organization, spends his first 6 weeks doing nothing but talking to everyone one-on-one. What are you seeing? What are you doing? What's holding you back? What are your problems? And one of the servicemen said, you know, sir, I barely have a GED. You're captain of the Navy. I don't even know why you're talking to me. And Captain Michael says, because people closest to the problems always have the best ideas, and I'd like to hear yours. This guy goes, well, sir, I joined the Navy to try to help my country, and all I do is paint this boat. I'm really tired of painting the boat. If you would just swap the bolts with stainless steel bolts, they would rust less, we could paint less, and then I'd actually have time to study for my tests. Captain Michael writes that down, does some research. Sure enough, this guy is right. It is now standard in the Navy to use stainless steel bolts because of an idea a guy with a GED gave Captain Michael. Captain Michael goes on, another guy said, we never have any fun, we're cooped up downstairs, it's awful, it's unfun. Captain Michael says, what are your ideas? How about an on-deck barbecue? Captain Michael says, that's a good idea, I'll look into it. And he sets up an on-deck barbecue, grills going, tables on top, and Captain goes on top, up in crow's nest, and he leans down and he watches. When the food is ready, the servicemen and women line up, they get in line, and then the officers come out about 10, 15 minutes later, and they cut the line, they get their food first, and then they go and sit down at the officer's table. Captain Michael doesn't say anything, not a word. He just quietly watches. And when the line of servicemen and women has gotten down to about 4 or 5 left, he walks down and he gets to the back of the line. One of the lieutenants come over and says, sir, you can cut the line. You're an officer, we've earned it. Captain Michael says, no, I'm good, thanks. Last one served is Captain Michael. He takes his plate and he sits down with the servicemen and women. Not an email, not a policy, not a poster, not a comment, in an all-hands meeting. Next month, Captain Michael goes back up to the crow's nest, leans down and watches. Food's ready. Servicemen and women come up, they get in line. 10 to 15 minutes later, the officers come out. They get to the back of the line. Last one served. And as they get their plates, they go and they sit with the servicemen and women. His lesson is lead by example, not with policy. What you do in any leadership position, what you do is so much more important than what you say. And the bigger the team you manage and the higher you rise in your organization, the more you are watched without even knowing it. So everything comes down to action, action, action speaks louder than words. And the best thing you can do is not resort to more policy or crafting rules for people, but showing how it's done. Those are my 4 tips for how to maintain culture as you grow. Thanks for listening.